Mauthausen concentration camp is located in northern Austria. It's about a 1.5 hour drive from Salzburg and about a 2 hour drive from Vienna. Mauthausen was in operation from 1938 until it was liberated by American troops on May 5, 1945. According to the official Mauthausen Memorial webpage, of a total of around 190,000 people imprisoned in the Mauthausen concentration camp and its subcamps over 7 years, at least 90,000 died. This is a present-day aerial photo of Mauthausen. It consists of the camp portion, located here, and a quarry where many of the prisoners were forced to work, located here. Here I've zoomed into the camp area. The parking lot is down here, and the visitor center is here. We'll walk along this path to come to the first gate. This gate leads into the garage area, and this gate is also shown here in this picture. If you'll make note of this cement square, we'll talk about it in an upcoming slide. Once we pass through this gate and through the garage, we'll go up a set of stairs and come to another gate. This is the gate to the detention area where the inmates lived. Here's a view from the parking lot, looking towards the gate and the garage area. So the visitor center would be over here to our right. Behind this long brick wall, you can see the tops of some of the barracks in the prisoners section of the camp. Here's a close-up of that cement square we saw on the aerial view. This was known as a firewater pond, whose purpose was technically to serve as a water source for firefighting. However, many SS soldiers and their families used it as a swimming pool. This is the gate to the garage area and is how we'll enter the camp complex. Prior to liberation, a statue of an eagle and a swastika were located above the gate. Those have since been removed. The first inmates arrived in Mauthausen in 1938, about a year prior to the start of World War II. Inmates from over 40 countries were sent to Mauthausen, including countries such as Poland, the Soviet Union, Germany, Austria, Spain, France, Italy, among others. As we pass through the gate, we come to this large garage area. This area was primarily used by the SS. The building back here was the SS headquarters. The commandant's office was here, as well as other administrative offices. To the right is a set of stairs leading up to this upper level, and is where we'll go next. Mauthausen has numerous monuments and tributes to those who were sent there. This monument is in memory of Soviet General Dmitry Gorbachev. There are a few versions of the events, but in essence, it is believed that in February 1945, he and anywhere from 200 to 500 other inmates were made to stand in the garage courtyard we just saw. He and the others were sprayed with ice-cold water and made to remain standing outside in the freezing temperature. He and the other men ended up literally freezing to death. This monument was made to resemble a man frozen in a block of ice. The monument on the left represents an Albanian partisan shoving a German soldier to the ground. Per the official Mauthausen Memorial webpage, it is said to be an interpretation of the struggle of man against man. The monument to the right is a Hungarian memorial showing 9 resistance fighters raising their arms in their fight for freedom and justice. On the left is the Italian memorial, and it is a wall covered in plaques and photographs as a tribute to Italians sent to Mauthausen. The large memorial to the right is from the USSR. The inscription reads, "To the victims of fascism, 1941 to 1945. The Soviet people hold high in honor the bright memory of their sons who fell in the Great War for the freedom and happiness of the peoples of the USSR and all progressive humanity." This is a powerful monument of an emaciated prisoner with haunting eyes, raising his arms at the moment of liberation. The monument's architect and sculptor were both Mauthausen concentration camp survivors. In this series of monuments, the woman on the far left is part of the memorial of the German Democratic Republic. The middle picture is of the Jewish memorial, which represents a menorah with the inscription, "For those murdered for their Jewishness." On the right is a sculpture of a girl sitting on the ground in front of a swing and is part of the Children's and Youth Memorial. This is a memorial of the Federal Republic of Germany with the inscription, "To the victims of tyranny." This monument was so abstract to me when I first saw it. It wasn't until looking through my photos that I noticed this object. When I read about it on the Mauthausen Memorial webpage, I learned that it was supposed to symbolically represent the remains of a body, and the untreated iron being exposed to the elements is meant to create the effect of dried blood. This is the Dutch memorial. On the insides of these pillars are plaques with the names of those from the Netherlands who perished within the Mauthausen system. This is part of the Roma and Sinti Memorial. The inscription reads, "In awe and mourning, we Sinti and Roma remember our children, women, and men who were murdered in the Mauthausen concentration camp by the SS. Shortly before the end of the war, on March 9, 1945, 450 Sinti and Roma women and their children arrived in a transport from Ravensbrück to Mauthausen. The infants and children were murdered immediately after their arrival. We remember our 500,000 people who became victims of genocide within the entire area of influence of National Socialism." Now we'll move from the area with the memorials and all of the monuments along this path, taking us to the stairs of death and the cliff overlooking the quarry. It's hard to appreciate from this aerial view, but this area is all elevated, and the quarry is actually very deep in comparison. This desolate path takes us through the woods and around to the stairs of death. The plaque to the right reads, "In eternal remembrance of the thousands of unfortunate sons of our people who died a cruel death here simply because they were Jews." These are photos taken from the top of the stairs of death, looking down into the quarry. Most of the inmates at Mauthausen were forced to work in the quarry. It was about 50 meters or 150 feet from the top to the bottom of the quarry. At first, the steps varied in height and were poorly constructed. Around 1941 to 1942, the stairs were rebuilt to make the steps more equal in height. Men were made to carry blocks of granite, typically weighing around 50 kilograms, which is about 110 pounds, on their backs up the 186 steps. The plaque to the right reads, "Prisoners of various nationalities worked here, and the most basic security measures were ignored. The greatest workload was demanded of the inmates with brutality. This also offered the best opportunity to liquidate prisoners as quickly as possible. With a stone often weighing up to 50 kilograms on their shoulders, they were driven through the quarry at a run, constantly being hit, and would soon collapse, only to die helplessly in some corner." This is a view from down in the quarry. The stairs of death would be to my back. It's hard to appreciate from the photo, but this is a massive area, and it's quite a long walk from one end all the way to the other. You also have to keep in mind that when this area was in use, you didn't have all of the greenery that you see now. In this photo to the left, you can see a more accurate representation of what the quarry looked like at the time. The stairway is seen over here. And looking at these men down here gives you an idea of the scale of the size of the quarry. This area of water still remains today. From the top of this cliff, Nazis were known to push prisoners over the edge, causing them to free fall to their death below. The Nazis would cruelly refer to these victims as parachutists, and this cliff became known as the Parachutist Cliff. In this view, I'm standing in the quarry, looking back at the stairs of death. This concrete marker recognizes those whose lives were lost on the Parachutist Cliff above. As I mentioned on a previous slide, men were made to carry those blocks of granite, typically weighing 50 kilograms or 110 pounds, on their backs up the 186 steps. They would use a device like what you see over here. They would kind of put it on like a backpack with these straps over their shoulders. And then on this platform back here, the granite block would rest. The men would have to hunch forward, carrying the weight of the block on their back. As you can see in the photo to the left, the men would be tightly packed together as they made their way up the staircase. It was not uncommon for Nazi soldiers standing near the top to strike out at some of the men, causing them to fall backwards, creating a domino effect down the stairs. The staircase became known as Stairs of Death, a name it continues to go by today. In this video, I'm going to start at the bottom of the quarry and walk up the 186 steps. As I reach the top, you can hear how I'm breathing heavier. I'm wearing rugged shoes and just carrying a light sling bag, and I got winded from this climb. Imagine what this must have been like, wearing worn-out shoes or wooden clogs and carrying a 100-pound block of stone on your back up these stairs multiple times a day, no matter if it was raining, snowing, freezing cold, or burning hot, in addition to being beaten with whips all along the way. In this view, we're back over where the memorial monuments are. You can see the Stairs of Death in the distance, and the deep, massive quarry is below us. Here we've traveled from the quarry back to the main gate to the prisoner section. Just to refresh your memory, here's the parking lot, and then we walked through this main gate, through the SS garage, and then up here to this gate. Now we will go through, enter the prisoner section, and work our way down here to the infirmary building, and then we'll take a look at these grassy areas over here. Here we've passed through the gate into the detention area where the prisoner barracks were located. The only way in and out of the prisoners section was through this gate. Next we'll move to this area, which was known as the Wailing Wall. Upon arriving to Mauthausen, Prisoners were often lined up along this wall that was dubbed the Wailing Wall. Prisoners were often beaten and chained to the wall for hours and even days. Memorial plaques now adorn the wall. With the Wailing Wall to our backs, the photo on the right shows what it looks like looking down the length of the camp wall. As we pass through the gate to the prisoner section, Barrack number 1 is to our left. As the sign reads, Barracks 1 was used as a workplace and a common area for prisoner functionaries. They had to carry out organizational tasks and guard duties for the SS. Prisoner functionaries had a better chance of survival and were granted privileges. In 1942, the left half of this barracks was converted into a brothel for prisoners. Sadly, a camp brothel was not unique to Mauthausen. Several camps had these as an incentive for some of the prisoners. The women were usually brought from Ravensbrück concentration camp to the brothels and made to serve as prostitutes. The women were typically promised that they would be released from being in a concentration camp early in exchange for, quote unquote, volunteering to prostitute themselves. Of course, this was all a lie by the Nazis. Interestingly, Jewish women were not allowed to be prostitutes in the brothels, and Jewish men were not allowed to visit the brothels. The building to our right is the camp prison. The sign reads, "The camp prison was used to isolate some prisoners from the rest of the camp." The building was also called the bunker or cell block. There were 33 prison cells, 2 washrooms, and 5 SS guard rooms. Most cells had no furniture. This is in the prison looking down at a row of cell blocks. The sign reads, "In this building, sealed off from the rest of the camp, male and female prisoners were interrogated, tortured, and murdered." People were transferred to the camp prison for actual or alleged violations of camp regulations, political interrogations, or to isolate them before they were executed. Executions were often carried out in the camp prison courtyard, as well as in the gas chamber and the execution room, which were located in the basement of this building. Survivors speak of darkness, being denied food, serious injury, and sexual violence. Towards the end of the Second World War, political hostages of the Nazi regime, so-called prominent prisoners, were held in individual cells. This memorial wall is located just outside the camp prison. This plaque reads, "On the 6th and 7th September 1944, 40 Dutch and 7 British special agents who had been dropped above German-occupied territory cruelly were put to death in this camp by the Nazis. Their bodies were burned in the crematorium. At the risk of their lives, Yugoslav and Russian prisoners buried the ashes of these war heroes at this place." The infirmary building is a large building that houses an exhibition hall, memorial museum, and a room of names in one section, and a gas chamber, crematoria, autopsy room, and mortuary in another section. So now we'll go through the infirmary building. Lethal injections and medical experiments were done at Mauthausen. This is one exhibit on display the illustration of a skin reaction from files relating to vaccination experiments on prisoners in Mauthausen in 1943. It goes on to say, as well as conducting series of tests for vaccinations, SS doctors in Mauthausen and Gusen also carry out pharmaceutical and nutritional experiments on prisoners. Well over 500 deaths are known to have resulted from these kind of experiments. This display shows a syringe from Mauthausen. It says the damaged syringe, which was used to inject lethal substances, is smuggled out of the camp in 1943 by the prisoner Alois Stockinger, who was assigned to the infirmary pharmacy. In 1946, in the run-up to the Mauthausen trials, he turns it over to the investigators as a piece of evidence, and he himself testifies as a witness to the lethal injections. Later, Stockinger presents the syringe to the collections of the Mauthausen Memorial. In the gas chamber at Mauthausen, special fans were used to expedite extracting residual gas out of the chamber after the killings were done. This allowed men to be able to safely enter the chamber to remove the bodies. This photo shows one of the extractor fans used at Mauthausen, and the sign reads, "After the prisoners have been gassed, the gas chamber is ventilated using this extractor fan." Shortly before the liberation of the camp, the SS had all technical equipment removed from the gas chamber. Czech prisoners save the extractor fan and take it with them to Prague. In the 1950s, they donated it to the Terezín Memorial. As we continue working our way through the infirmary building, we come across a crematoria before entering the room of names. This is the room of names. On these platforms are the names of over 84,000 people who died in the Mauthausen-Gusen concentration camp system. In some areas on the platform, the black surface is left blank to symbolize those whose names remain unknown who lost their lives here. As we exit the room of names, we enter the undressing room. The sign reads, "In this room, prisoners were made to undress and undergo an examination for gold teeth before they were killed." The gas chamber is pictured here. The sign reads, "Between March 1942 and the end of April 1945, at least 3,455 people were murdered in the gas chamber using poison gas." This is Mauthausen's first crematorium oven. The sign next to it states, "This oven started operating in May 1940. It was in constant use until the liberation of the camp." Next door was the autopsy room. In this room, the SS had autopsies performed on the corpses. SS doctors also dissected corpses for training purposes. Next, we come to the mortuary. This room was equipped with a cooling mechanism. The prisoners' corpses were stored here until incineration. In this open area were the gallows. From 1942 onwards, prisoners sentenced to death were hanged from an iron crossbeam positioned below the glass roof. And here you can see the iron crossbeam. As we move to the museum area, we see an example of a prisoner's uniform to the left. In the middle is a soup bowl a prisoner would have kept with him at all times. Also seen is a spoon and knife made out of scraps of wood and metal made by a prisoner. To the right is a mallet and a chisel used for work in the quarry. Here, a pistol and rifle used by the SS are shown. In the upper right is a Zyklon B canister. Zyklon B came in the form of pellets, and when they were dropped into the gas chamber, created a poisonous gas. Auschwitz concentration camp was the first camp to use Zyklon B, but other camps adapted its use as a means of mass killing. This display in the museum made an impact on me of the resilience shown by a survivor upon being liberated. The sign says, Stanisław Kalinski does not want to wait for his return home to be organized. He receives a bicycle from nuns in Linz, and that's a city nearby Mauthausen. Together with two other survivors, he sets off with it on the long journey home to Poland. He keeps the bike as a memento until the end of his life. So can you imagine riding this bicycle from Austria all the way home to Poland? Now we've exited this long infirmary building, and we'll make our way to these grassy areas where barracks once stood. This area was considered the quarantine ward and housed barracks number 16 through 20. Sick prisoners were isolated from the rest of the camp here. Those who were unable to work and groups of selected for execution were also isolated here prior to their execution. After February 1945, barracks 16, 17, and 18 served as a women's camp. Barrack 20 was also part of the quarantine ward, but it was also known as the death block. So this glass marker reads barracks number 20 in the camp jargon referred to as death block, assumed from end of 1939 the function of a special area marked off for inmates with contagious diseases. They were kept without almost any medical care in unheated rooms, hardly fed at all, and subjected to regular selections. The inmates classified as incurable were either clubbed to death or killed with injections of poison. In 1942 and 1943, inmates of Block 20 were also murdered in the gas wagon, a truck that had been rebuilt for execution by gas. From the spring of 1944 onward, altogether about 5,000 so-called Action K inmates were imprisoned here, recaptured prisoners of war who after a previous outbreak had been brought to Mauthausen to be executed. Even if they were not immediately liquidated, they hardly ever survived the maltreatment and hunger for more than 4 to 6 weeks. On the 2nd of February 1945, 500 inmates of Block 20 attempted the largest outbreak in the history of the camp. Some 20 succeeded to escape and survived. The others became victims of a large-scale search. In this view, I'm standing at the fence near Barrack 20, looking out towards an area known as the execution site. The execution site used to be about 25 meters, or about 75 feet, outside the camp fence. Shootings and hangings took place there, though none of the structures remain today. In this view, I've moved down the fence line and am looking at another area outside the camp fence. The sign marks the area known as the ash dump, which is in the vicinity of the cross and commemorative stone. A nearby sign mentioned that from 1944 onward, ashes of those cremated were collectively poured into this dump site. The sign also stated that in the last weeks before liberation, the crematorium could no longer cope with the masses of corpses and the large number of deceased inmates, so they were hastily buried in mass graves. Now I've turned around and am looking back over this large grassy area that was once filled with prisoner barracks. At the far end down here is a marker commemorating the former site of Barrack 5, which was known as the Jewish Block. Near the gate entrance to the prisoners section are 3 plaques commemorating the camp's liberators. The first plaque honors the U.S. Army's 65th Infantry Division and the 131st Evacuation Hospital. The middle plaque honors members of the 11th Armored Division of the 3rd U.S. Army, while the plaque on the right honors soldiers of the 26th Infantry Division of the 3rd U.S. Army. On the left, you can see a present-day photo of the gate to the prisoners section. To the right is the same gate, but at the time of liberation, and you can see the American troops driving through on the tank.